For decades, Neil Diamond was the voice of a generation, the man whose songs lit up stadiums, healed broken hearts, and gave the world an anthem with Sweet Caroline. His music defined love, hope, and the power of resilience. But at 84 years old, the man who once commanded the stage with endless energy has faced a reality no one was prepared for. What happened to him will leave you holding back tears. Neil's story is not just one of fame, it's one of courage. For years, fans noticed the changes. His voice softer, his movements slower, and his absence from the spotlight more noticeable. Rumors swirled, but Neil stayed silent, quietly battling something far more powerful than any chart-topping hit. Then one night he broke his silence, and the world finally understood why. Standing beneath the stage lights for what he called his final performance, Neil looked out over the audience with eyes full of emotion. His trembling voice carried a message no one expected. "This might be my last time, but my music will live forever." The crowd rose, tears flowing freely as they realized they were witnessing the end of an era, the final bow of a man whose songs had carried them through life's highs and lows. Behind that farewell was a story of struggle, acceptance, and incredible strength. Despite the pain, Neil refused to fade away in bitterness. Instead, he found peace in the legacy he built, a legacy of love, endurance, and timeless melodies. At 84, Neil Diamond's life reminds us of something powerful. Even when the music stops, the song never truly ends. Before he became a global icon, before Sweet Caroline echoed through stadiums and wedding halls around the world, Neil Diamond was just a young man from Brooklyn with a guitar, a dream, and a voice that carried both power and pain. His story didn't begin with fame or fortune. It began in a small, working-class home where music was both an escape and a promise of something more. Born on January 24, 1941, Neil Leslie Diamond grew up during a time when America was changing fast. His parents, Rose and Akiba Diamond, worked hard to give their son a better life. But it wasn't until he got his first guitar at 16 that his destiny truly began to take shape. "It was like finding my best friend," Neil once said. "Every song I wrote was me trying to understand myself." In those early years, Neil's dream wasn't stardom, it was survival. He studied pre-med at New York University, but his heart wasn't in it. Between classes, he spent long nights writing songs in cheap apartments, hoping one of them might change his life. And then it happened. In the early 1960s, Neil got a job writing songs for other artists at the legendary Brill Building in Manhattan, the creative heart of American pop music. He was surrounded by future legends like Carole King and Jerry Goffin, and it was there that Neil began to find his sound. He penned catchy hits like "I'm a Believer" for the Monkees, a song that became an instant classic and showed the world that Neil Diamond was more than just another songwriter. He was a storyteller with soul. But Neil didn't want to hide behind other voices. He wanted to tell his own stories, in his own way. In 1966, he released "Solitary Man," a song that captured both his loneliness and his quiet strength. It wasn't just music, it was confession. The song resonated deeply with people who felt unseen, and suddenly, Neil Diamond was no longer just a name in the credits, he was the voice of a generation. The late 1960s and early 70s marked Neil's unstoppable rise. His hits, "Cracklin' Rosie," "Song Sung Blue," "Holly Holy," and "Sweet Caroline," filled the airwaves. Each performance was electric. He didn't just sing. He felt every word, and the audience felt it too. His deep baritone voice, paired with lyrics of love and loss, made people believe in something again, in sincerity, in emotion, in real music. By the time he stepped onto the stage at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles in 1972, Neil Diamond had become more than a performer. He was a phenomenon. Dressed in his signature glittering shirts, bathed in light, he commanded the stage like few others could. Yet behind that confident smile, Neil carried the same quiet introspection that had driven him from the start. Fame had found him, but it hadn't changed his heart. Still, success came with a price. Endless tours, constant recording, and the pressure to stay at the top began to take their toll. Neil later admitted that at the height of his fame, he sometimes felt trapped by his own success. "It's a beautiful cage," he said, "but it's still a cage." Despite the exhaustion, Neil kept creating. His songs continued to evolve, raw, spiritual, and deeply human. By the 1980s, he was not just a pop icon. He was a living legend. And as his music touched millions around the world, Neil's legacy was sealed. What few knew, however, was that behind the applause and standing ovations, a battle was slowly beginning to brew, one that would test his strength in ways no stage ever could. The world saw the glitter and glory, but Neil knew that life's greatest performances often happen off stage, when no one is watching, and the lights go out. By the mid-1970s, Neil Diamond had become one of the most successful artists on the planet. His concerts were sold out months in advance. His records went platinum again and again, and his songs became a soundtrack to millions of lives. From Love on the Rocks to You Don't Bring Me Flowers, Neil's voice carried both power and heartbreak, a balance only he could master. But while the world saw a superstar shining brighter than ever, behind the scenes, a quiet storm was brewing. Neil's fame had reached extraordinary heights. In 1976, his Hot August Night album captured the raw magic of his live performances, turning him into a legend. Fans called him the Jewish Elvis, not just for his commanding stage presence, but for the intensity he brought to every performance. His concerts weren't just shows, they were experiences, filled with emotion, storytelling, and moments that felt almost spiritual. People didn't just listen to Neil Diamond, they felt him. Yet, as the spotlight grew brighter, Neil began to feel trapped inside it. The grueling schedule, endless touring, and constant demand for perfection began to wear him down. He once admitted, "The hardest thing about being loved by millions is realizing how lonely you can still feel." Off stage, Neil struggled with anxiety and self-doubt, feelings that clashed painfully with his public image of strength and confidence. The 1980s brought even more success and more pressure. His film debut in The Jazz Singer, 1980, though met with mixed reviews, became a box office success thanks to his passionate performance and unforgettable soundtrack. Songs like Hello Again and America became instant classics. But the toll was growing heavier. The constant work, the emotional exhaustion, and the need to live up to impossible expectations left Neil feeling empty inside. Friends say that even during his greatest triumphs, he was haunted by a feeling that something was missing. He once said quietly to a confidant, "I've written about love all my life, but I don't always know how to hold on to it." His personal life reflected that struggle. 2 marriages ended in heartbreak before he finally found lasting peace with his third wife, Katie McNeil, many years later. But even as his personal battles grew, Neil never stopped creating. In the 1990s and early 2000s, he continued to release deeply emotional albums like Tennessee Moon and 12 Songs, proving that his songwriting genius hadn't faded. His music matured, wiser, more reflective, carrying the weight of a man who had lived through it all. Then came the tours, massive, sold-out performances that drew generations of fans together. Seeing Neil Diamond live was like stepping back in time. His voice still powerful, his charisma undimmed. But behind those glittering shirts and bright lights, subtle signs of struggle were beginning to appear. He moved a little slower. His once effortless gestures looked more deliberate. At first, fans thought it was simply age, but Neil knew something was wrong. By the late 2010s, whispers began to circulate. Some noticed he had started canceling shows. Others said his energy seemed different. In 2018, Neil made the heartbreaking announcement that he was retiring from touring due to a Parkinson's disease diagnosis. The news stunned the world. The man whose voice had once shaken arenas was now facing a battle inside his own body, a battle he couldn't perform his way through. Neil released a statement that broke hearts everywhere. "It is with great reluctance and disappointment that I announce my retirement from concert touring. I have been so honored to bring my shows to the public for the last 50 years. My sincerest apologies to everyone who planned to come to my upcoming shows. I plan to remain active in writing, recording, and other projects for a long time to come. True to form, Neil didn't ask for pity. He offered gratitude. Even in his pain, he thanked his fans for a lifetime of love. But for those who had followed him for decades, the thought of never seeing him perform again was almost unbearable. Neil Diamond's golden years had brought him fortune, fame, and love from millions. But as the curtain began to fall, he faced his greatest test yet, learning how to let go of the stage that had defined his life. When Neil Diamond announced his retirement from touring in 2018, fans around the world were heartbroken. It felt as if the lights had dimmed on one of music's brightest souls. For over 5 decades, Neil had been a symbol of strength, passion, and artistry, a man whose deep, gravelly voice could lift spirits or break hearts with equal power. But now, the man who had given so much of himself to the world was facing a fight that would test him in ways fame never could. Neil's diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, a progressive neurological disorder that affects movement and coordination, came as a quiet shock. For years, subtle symptoms had been creeping in. Tremors in his hands, stiffness in his movements, and moments of fatigue that even he struggled to explain. At first, he brushed it off as part of aging. But when his body began to betray the rhythm that once guided his every step on stage, Neil knew it was time to face the truth. When he broke the news publicly, his message was pure Neil Diamond, humble, dignified, and full of gratitude. "My thanks go out to my loyal and devoted audiences around the world," he said. "You will always have my appreciation for your support and encouragement. This ride has been so good, so good, so good thanks to you." The line, a nod to his legendary anthem, Sweet Caroline, brought tears to millions. In the months that followed, Neil quietly stepped away from the world's spotlight, but not from music. Writing and recording became his therapy, his way of staying connected to the only constant love of his life, his art. Friends and family said he continued to play guitar and sing every day, even when his hands trembled. "Music still heals me," he once told a reporter. "It's my medicine." Though he could no longer perform long tours, Neil found new ways to reach his audience. In 2020, a simple video clip went viral. Neil sitting at home, strumming his guitar, singing Sweet Caroline with rewritten lyrics to bring comfort during the COVID-19 pandemic. "Hands, washing hands," he sang with a smile. The world laughed, cried, and sang along. Even in his struggle, Neil's warmth and humor shone through. Behind the smiles, however, the reality of his condition was harsh. Parkinson's slowly stripped away the ease with which he once performed. But instead of retreating in bitterness, Neil chose acceptance. "I don't dwell on the disease," he said. "I focus on what I can still do." His wife, Katie McNeil Diamond, became his pillar of strength, always by his side, protecting his privacy while encouraging his creativity. Together they faced the challenges with quiet grace. In 2022, fans got a surprise that brought them to tears. During the opening night of A Beautiful Noise, the Broadway musical based on his life and music, Neil Diamond, now 81, appeared unexpectedly. As the cast and audience looked on in disbelief, he stood up from his seat, microphone in hand, and began singing Sweet Caroline. His voice, though softer, still carried the same fire it always had. The crowd erupted, singing with him, tears streaming down their faces. It wasn't just a song, it was a farewell, a moment of shared love between a legend and the people who never stopped believing in him. For Neil, that night was more than nostalgia. It was triumph. Against the weight of illness and time, he proved that true artistry doesn't fade. It transforms. His courage reminded the world that even when the body weakens, the soul's music endures. Today, Neil Diamond lives a quieter life in Colorado, surrounded by family, music, and peace. He still writes when inspiration strikes and often listens to recordings of his past concerts, reminders of a life fully lived. "I'm not done," he once said softly. "I just do things differently now." His journey, from a Brooklyn dreamer to one of the greatest songwriters of all time, has always been about connection, resilience, and heart. At 84, Neil Diamond's story isn't one of sadness. It's one of grace. He may have taken his final bow, but his music continues to play, in radios, in memories, and in every voice that sings, Sweet Caroline. Good times never seemed so good. Even as the years have taken their toll, Neil Diamond's legacy continues to shine brighter than ever. At 84 years old, the man who once filled arenas with thunderous applause now lives quietly, but his music still echoes across generations. From stadiums to living rooms, his songs remain a source of comfort, joy, and nostalgia. For millions, Neil Diamond isn't just a musician. He's a memory, a moment, and a melody that never fades. Long after his retirement from touring, the world continues to celebrate his work. His greatest hits, Sweet Caroline, Cracklin' Rosie, Love on the Rocks, Forever in Blue Jeans, and Song Sung Blue, have transcended time. Younger audiences who never saw him live still sing his lyrics with the same emotion their parents once did. At baseball games, weddings, and even hospital rooms, Sweet Caroline has become an anthem of unity, proof that Neil's music belongs to everyone. In interviews, fellow musicians often speak of Neil with deep respect. Billy Joel once called him one of the finest songwriters America ever produced, while Barbra Streisand described their duet, You Don't, Bring Me Flowers, as one of the most heartfelt collaborations of my life. Even artists from newer generations, from Chris Stapleton to Ed Sheeran, have cited Neil as an influence, admiring his honesty and emotional vulnerability. What makes Neil Diamond's legacy so enduring is not just his voice or the brilliance of his songwriting, but the sincerity behind it. Every song he wrote came from truth, often raw, sometimes painful, but always real. He didn't chase trends or reinvent himself for fame. He wrote what he felt, and people felt it too. If my songs mean something to someone, he once said, then I've done my job. In 2022, the Broadway musical A Beautiful Noise brought Neil's story back into the spotlight, reintroducing his life and music to new audiences. The show follows his journey from a young songwriter in New York to an international icon, and the emotional toll that fame took on him. Neil attended the premiere, his eyes glistening as the audience gave him a standing ovation. And then, in an unforgettable moment, he rose and sang Sweet Caroline. The room exploded in emotion, laughter, tears, and thunderous applause. It was as if the entire world had come together for one final chorus. But Neil's legacy extends far beyond his music career. Throughout his life, he's used his influence for good, supporting numerous charities focused on health, education, and children's welfare. Even after his diagnosis, he continued to raise awareness for Parkinson's disease, encouraging others to stay hopeful and active. Life doesn't end with a diagnosis, he said in one of his last public statements. It just changes its rhythm. Those words resonated deeply with fans who saw in him not a fading star, but a man of extraordinary strength and humility. In his quiet years in Colorado, Neil still surrounds himself with music. Friends say he often spends mornings sitting by his piano, humming melodies that may never be recorded but live in his heart. His wife, Katie, says he finds peace in the mountains, watching the sunrise, strumming his guitar, sometimes smiling to himself, as if hearing an old song again for the first time. Even as time has slowed him, the world hasn't forgotten. His songs continue to chart on streaming platforms, his records sell steadily, and tributes pour in from fans who grew up with his music. To them, Neil Diamond isn't just the man behind the microphone, he's the soundtrack of their lives. When asked how he wants to be remembered, Neil's answer was simple and pure, as a man who tried to tell the truth through music. And in that truth lies his greatest gift, a reminder that love, pain, and hope are threads that connect us all. At 84, Neil Diamond may have stepped off the stage, but the applause never truly stopped. His melodies linger, his words still heal, and his presence, though quieter, continues to fill the world with warmth. Because for every person who's ever sung along to Sweet Caroline, the song doesn't end when the music fades. It lives on, in our memories, in our hearts, and in the timeless voice of a man who gave us all something to believe in.